Shalom, Most High Christ. Bless y'all, congregation.
Shalom.
Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Oh, I like that. He was gung-ho. Happy Sabbath. Happy, happy, happy. All praises to the Most High Christ for another Sabbath for us to observe. I pray everybody's week wasn't too burdensome. So, today's class, I've had like a multitude of topics floating in my head, but it's inspired by a class that we did some years ago in headquarters, probably about 8 years ago now, and with a little twist on it. So at that time, it was called To Be Like Elisha. I have a little hyphen next to mine. It's To Be Like Elisha, man up, Jacob. And we'll see what the man up really means, because I think oftentimes when we talk about how mighty our forefathers were, we tell brothers to man up. I think they're thinking only of the physical macho-ness of what that means. And we're talking about, we're going to give examples of that, of how, you know, our forefathers were like superheroes, right? But there's more to it. And this is why it's titled To Be Like Elisha and not like David's mighty men. Not like, you know, Adino, the captain of captains, not like that, right? And the man up has many elements. Man up deals with, obviously, first and foremost, right, having that, you know, that level of masculinity, all right, that our forefathers displayed. But it's also spiritual, right? It's manly to be a proper husband, father, example to the nation. And also mentally, 'cause that's a big one. But I'll get into it. All right, so let's start with 1 Samuel 17 and 1. 1 Samuel 17 and 1. We're going to read straight through to 11. All right, I might stop a little bit. Let me know when you guys are ready, because I'm going to start pulling some stuff up. All right? So just have Google ready. And there's some images that we'll pull up. So we're going to read about David and Goliath. 1 Samuel 17 and 1.
The book of 1 Samuel chapter 17 verse 1. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shochoh, which belonged to Judah, and pitched between Shochoh and Issachar in Ephes Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and pitched in the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines.
Right, so this is like a battle scene. So if you've ever seen movies, right, Braveheart, Lord of the Rings, what you're seeing is they all ready for the battle, right? You got to visualize this stuff, because a lot of times the way Christianity has done a number on our people's minds, we forget this aspect of our people, right? There's more scriptures in the Old Testament than there are in the New. The foundation of who we are as a people, we were a warlike people. All right? We fought for many years. Now our war is spiritual, but when the kingdom comes, we're going to go back to that physicality of it as well. So you gotta understand, historically, we're not a bunch of effeminate Caesar Borgias, right, when we think about Christianity. When you embrace your heritage as a Hebrew, you got to understand what the Hebrews were about, right? Go ahead, read.
And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side. And there was a valley between them.
So it's exactly like you see in the movies. This is where they get all that stuff from, right? It was written here first. And they were like, listen, we're going to set this up. They're going to each come down from the other side of the mountain, and they're going to fight in the valley. And this is where it's going to go down, right? Go ahead, read.
And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span.
Right, and you know who borrowed from this scene? Troy, with Brad Pitt. They borrowed. because that dude was supposed to be there, Goliath. Troy was supposed to be David because he was like smaller and slender. I mean, fit and everything still, but just smaller and slender, right? So it was their champion, right? All right, let's let your champion fight our champion. So they said, listen, we're going to send out Goliath. All right, go ahead, read.
And he had an helmet of brass upon his head.
I'm sorry, read verse 4 again.
Verse 4. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span.
Right, so now there's some speculation on what a cubit is. I've read that a cubit's only 18 inches, right? So I don't know, what is that? What's 6 times 18? Who's the math guru?
9 feet 6 inches.
9 feet 6 inches. So tall, right? Like huge, okay? But not like big brothers now. You see like 8-footers, 7'10" brothers now, and they're all lanky, they can't hold the weight on their bones, right? Physically now, we're not made to really be that big, right? Right, so he was, yeah, see, Shaq's probably the closest big guy that you could compare to that, but he's only 7. So picture like the mass of Shaq, but more defined, and then 2 more feet on top of that. Damn near 3.
Right, the basketball rim is what, 10 feet?
Yeah.
So it could take a foot off of that.
So I would say 10 feet is probably the floor to that beam. That's right up there, all right? So that's how big Goliath was, right? This is their champion. So come on, read on.
Verse 5. And he had an helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass.
Now, I don't know how much a shekel weighed, all right? But 5,000 of anything is a lot, all right? So if a shekel was a penny, those of y'all who save your change, right, in the water jug, that thing is heavy as hell. Imagine 5,000 of that, and that's what his armor weighed like. So he had chainmail, he had a helmet of brass. The dude wasn't just, you're not just seeing some 10-foot, damn near 10-foot big African, right, big black man coming at you. Now he's girded up for war, right? So you were gonna say something?
No.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
And he had greaves of brass upon his legs.
So the greaves is like what you have on the armbands, you have them on the legs, right? So they would wear them and they would cover the shins and strap them. Okay, go ahead, read.
And the target of brass between his shoulders.
Now the target of brass between his shoulders, I want you to look this up because people, you're thinking of Target and you're thinking Target, right? Like the store Target with the Target, right? I have a letter next to mine that says Gorget. So search for Gorget, Gorget, and go to images. I'm just trying to paint a visual for y'all, right? And then go to images, and then go down, so go to the 3rd one over, up from the top. Yeah, you can go there, that's good, I'll take that one. So this is what he means between his shoulders. So Gorget, he also had this other piece of armor over the mail, right? And it covered the neck and everything. So basically, he was almost impenetrable.
That's exactly what he was wearing in the movie Troy when he came out.
Right. So he had the Gorget, he had the helmet, he had chainmail armor that weighed 5,000 shekels. All right, go ahead, read.
And the staff of his spear was a weaver's beam.
So hold on, look up weaver's beam. All right, so if you're not familiar with that, a weaver's beam. Because the point I'm trying to get upon you now, you see a 7-8 footer now, and a Hamite that's a 7-8 footer, and he's like starving, like he's emaciated, right? Like you see knobby knees and knobby elbows, like you know what I'm saying? Like he ain't got no shoulders, all right? That's not what Goliath was. So weaver's beam. So get me a good, there's one. Go all the way to the top right. What does that look like? Let me see that. Blow it up. I can't see too good. Yeah, that's thick, but that's not good enough. I mean, well, it's thick, so you got to see how big his hand was. See if there's any other good ones. See, the modern one is those rolls, those big rolls. But I want like an older one. Oh, well, that's the picture of Goliath, but I don't think that does it justice. No. So go to the modern one. That's fine. So pick one of those gray rolls or something like that, so you can understand. Yeah, but that don't look like a weaver's beam in his hand. You know what I'm saying? That looks like a regular spear. I want you to understand, it wasn't just long, the girth of it. No, not that one. Go back. Go to the roll. The one that looks like down. You right there, down. Okay, you could go to that one. Yes, go to that one. All right. Maybe you could kind of get some perspective from that, but that's how his spear was, the staff of his spear, all right? Look how wide that is. You couldn't grab that with both your hands. The biggest brother in here couldn't grab that with both his hands. A spear is made to be welded in one hand, right? And you can thrust it and throw it, all right? So I'm trying to create a visual for you of what David and all of them were up against, all right? Go ahead, so read.
And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron.
And the spear's head, the part that was made out of iron, weighed 600 shekels of iron. Again, I don't know what a shekel is, but for a beam of his spear to be that thick and big, all right, it had to be a very sharp point. The spearhead was probably as big as the biggest brother's head in here, all right? I don't know who had the biggest head, but, all right, but I don't want to insult nobody. But think about that. That's the tip of the spear, all right?
Remember, the coins back then were a lot heavier.
Well, because they were real.
What we got now.
Yeah, it's not like this zinc, whatever, like it was
Even the
metal.
older brothers with the Susan B. Anthony, the 50 cents piece, man, that's pretty heavy, man. Right? You ever know what I'm talking about, right? That's pretty heavy. So
Man, if you got $2 in quarters in your pocket, that thing is heavy. You be walking like this if it's in the right pocket, right? So, so imagine 600 shekels or something, right? Go ahead, read.
And one bearing a shield went before him. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me, and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him, and kill him, then shall ye be our servants, and serve us. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together.
Damn, that's like he was just basically calling Israel out. It's like, look at you normal sized brothers. Come over here. See who's gonna fight. Super confident. The point that I want you to get for this, physically, the guy was so impressive, and he was their champion. So you can imagine nobody had beat him to this point, clearly. All right? The level of confidence that he had, now later that's going to come into play, all right? The level of confidence, or dare I say faith that he had in himself and his abilities, all right? Of course you're going to talk bold like that. You're going to talk strong. You're like, come here, ain't nobody going to beat me, right? Go ahead, read.
When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly
And the
afraid.
brothers were shook. They said, this is a giant. And he said, look at all the armor. They said, who the hell gonna fight him? Well, he wants to fight one-on-one. Maybe the whole army could come at him. You know what I'm saying? But who's gonna fight him one-on-one? Jump to verse 42.
Verse 42. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance.
Right? So I'm gonna give you an extreme. David was mighty in his own right? Tells you how David was. But compared to Goliath, he wasn't. But compared to Goliath, it's like you sent me to go fight him. Right? And look, and Ray's like, yeah, he was like, until you punched him in the throat, and then look, Tobias too, he's like, right? So it's like you see my little old me come out to fight this 10-foot guy. That gonna piss you the hell off. You gonna be like, are you insulting me? Like, what the hell is this, right? Go ahead, read.
And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his God.
Right, so he was offended. He was like, yo, I'm a dog that you come to me with this little thing to fight me? Like, are you crazy? Go ahead, read.
And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field.
Go ahead.
Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with the sword, and with the spear, and with the shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied.
So now going back to what I said about Goliath, and how he spoke so bold and strong, you see that and you're like, well, hell, it makes sense that he's talking strong. This dude is like, nobody would want to fight this man, right? You talk about, most people probably forfeited. All right, you got it. We'll be your servants. It's all right. We ain't got nobody that's willing to go up against you, you know, right? But David, in comparison to Goliath, because David was mighty in his own right, and even mightier, all right, was still felt just as confident, if not more so. And he said, listen, I got the Lord God of Israel on my side. And his faith, his confidence that he was going to prevail never wavered, despite what was in front of him. So it's time we start to develop that spirit of David, of his mighty men, of Solomon, and the spirit of Elijah and Elisha. Read on.
Verse 46. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and give the carcass of thy host, and give the carcass of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, and all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel.
Confidence. He saw this. I hope in some way I've impressed upon you how magnificent of a physical specimen Goliath was. And he's talking bold like that. Let me tell you something. I'm confident in my ability to defend myself, even against a large brother. But I wouldn't talk crap like that, because you never know. Like, anything could happen. You know what I'm saying? Maybe he get me pinned up against a wall. It'd be a little hard to breathe. You know, it's just. So big guys do. They try to pin you, especially if it's a little guy, because they can't grab you, just moving around and stuff. Right? So, that's right, Eliezer. Go ahead, read.
And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands.
And you know something? The battle is always the Lord's. This is why, I understand things happen occasionally. But if your consistent thing is that you're tired, oh, I don't feel good, oh, this is happening, oh, that happened, oh, I just worked a double. Yeah, listen, once in a while, anybody will be okay with something like that. Sometimes I gotta take my breaks and I gotta stop, right? Because you need to recharge. And you're more productive if you're able to recharge, right? But when the preponderance of what you do is not that effort for the Most High, and that has many levels. It doesn't just mean the responsibilities that are given here. It could just even mean that you got a lot of things within yourself that you're dealing with that you can't work out. And you need to man up in that first. But if you're not giving it the attention that it deserves, that's a childish behavior. That's a weak nature. And remember, we're very carnal, so our inclination is to clearly always what? Put the excuse. We don't like to accept accountability. We don't like to look and say, there's always going to be external factors. Always. There wouldn't be a Satan. We have an adversary, physically and spiritually. So you're always going to have adversity, which is where adversary comes from. That will never go away. It'll never be the perfect time. It'll never be the right time. There'll never be enough rest. Your body's never going to feel 100%. Your pinky toe may always hurt for the rest of your life. That's not an excuse. Not if you a real man. Not if you a real brute. Read.
And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistines.
So he went. That's how we need to approach every day. No matter what adversity is in front of us, don't just wait for that thing to resolve it. So attack that thing head on. Deal with it in the spirit. Go ahead.
And David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth.
Now, mind you, do not forget. First of all, I got to point out a few things. David was much smaller than Goliath. David had a rudimentary slingshot. It's not the type with the rubber, right? They didn't have rubber back. Rubber's made from oil. They didn't have rubber back then, right? It's this joint. Right? That's the joint that they had. It's not the one that you can pull back, right? And Goliath, all of y'all forgot he had a brass helmet on his head. And it said the stone hit him in the forehead and it sunk into his head. And he had a brass helmet on his head. All right? That's why you got to paint the image. You got to, we glaze over these things. You got to take that thing slow. You know what it is? We're so used to the TV and someone else's vision of what it is. That's why from a kid, I always loved reading more than the actual television, because it's where your mind will bring out for it. Everybody loved The Lord of the Rings as a movie. I read that thing 3 or 4 times as a kid, because it was just like, my mind was all over the place with this stuff. Right? What's that? It is some good books. It is some good books. Right? So he boom, through the metal, all that stuff, right into his forehead. Go ahead, read.
So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David.
Come on.
Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of the sheath thereof.
So he didn't say he ran and put his foot on him. The dude was so big that David stood on him. All right? And he drew Goliath's sword, which must have been huge because it said David had no sword. So he drew Goliath's sword, which means David was no slouch, is the point that I'm making you. But in comparison, right, to what was in front of him, everybody outside thought he was a slouch. It's the same thing when you look at Israel as a people. We ain't no slouch, but to all the other nations, right, we're the base things. We're an astonishment. We're a proverb and a byword. Right? We're seeing a lot of that. Actually, people live in the stereotype lately. All right? But what we have on our side and the power that is within us is much more than anything that we can deal with. Physically, spiritually, we have the edge. We have the advantage. Y'all just got to build your spirit to the point and man up to the point where you see that for what it is, and you don't let these things cripple you from your walk. All right, read. So he took his sword
and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled.
They all got the hell out of there. They said, wait a second, if one of them can do this to our champion, what the hell are they about to do to us? And they all fled. Read.
And the men of Israel and of Judah arose.
So that, right, northern kingdom and southern kingdom together. Go ahead.
And shouted and pursued the Philistines until thou come to the valley of the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to Shaharaim, even unto Gath and unto Ekron.
Now hold on a second. Let's go back to verse 11. I want to point something out. Verse 11, and then we're going to come back to 52. So read 11 and then go straight to 52.
Verse 11, when Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. And the men of Israel and of Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines.
By one man's bold and courageous action, by one brother manning up, it changed the hearts and minds of all the people that were with him. That they went from being fearful when they saw Goliath and heard his threats, to now they said, we're going to rally after these dudes and we're going to cut them and hew them down. Read.
And the men of Israel and of Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines.
They went from fear and dismay to pursuing them. Go ahead.
Until thou come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way of Sha'arim.
And they killed them all. You don't need to read all the names of those. I know we have a trouble with those too. Right? Let's go to 2 Samuel 23 and 8. David was mighty and valiant and confident in God. Confident in God. 2 Samuel 23. This is characteristics that the men should have. You're a real man about God. Go ahead.
2 Samuel chapter 23 verse 8. These be the names of the mighty men of David, whom David had. The Tachmonite that sat in the seat chief among the captains. The same was Adino, the Eznite. He lifted up his spear against 800, whom he slew at one time.
So Adino, the Eznite, was able to take on 800 men at one time. So you know, like you see, like what's the Bruce Lee flick where they all surround him? Is it
Into the Dragon?
No, did they do it in Enter the Dragon? Where's the one where he's wearing the yellow thing? They do it there too. Game of Death, right? That was Game of Death, right? So when he had the yellow jumpsuit, where he was wearing. Yeah, when he fought Kareem. Kareem left a big black footprint in his chest. Different levels, right? So they said Adino the Eznite, he was the captain of captains. He was chief among the captains, and he was a bad man. He said with his spear, he killed 800 men at the same time by himself. So that's like they all coming at him. And can you imagine what he doing with that spear? Just, boom, just taking them out. Hey, the closest thing you can get to that is that scene in The Matrix when all the Smiths come out and Neo just jacking them up. That's Adino the Eznite. All right, go ahead, read.
And after him was Eleazar, the son of Dodu.
Not this Eleazar. Eleazar, because I know he got excited when it came out. Eleazar. Nah, you a good brother, man. You all right. You okay. You're all right. You're all right. Go ahead, read.
The Ahohites, one of the 3 mighty men with David, when they defied the Philistines that were gathered together to battle, and the men of Israel were gone away.
Come on.
He arose and smote the
So he was
Philistines.
one of the ones with David during the fight with Goliath, all right? So go ahead, read.
He arose and smote the Philistines until his hand was weary, and his hand clave unto the sword.
And what it's telling you there, that means it's the same thing like that with Samson, what happened with Samson with the jawbone of the ass, that the blood and fat, because remember, you carving people up. So what happens when you start heating up fat? It gets all sticky and oily, right? And if you let it's cooling, it's hot, it's cooling, it's hot. His sword clave to his hand because there was so much blood and flesh. I know, right? It's gross, but I like that thing. That's right. That's how bad he was. He said his hand was weary, so guess what? The Most High said, here, I'm going to cleave that thing to your hand. So now it became part of his hand. He didn't have to grip it no more. Go ahead, read.
And the Lord wrought a great victory that day, and the people returned after him only to spoil. And after him was Shema, the son of Agi, the Harite. And the Philistines were gathered together into a troop, where was a piece of ground full of lentils, and the people fled from the Philistines. But he stood in the midst of the ground and defended it, and slew the Philistines, and the Lord wrought a great victory.
So, you know, like, if you remember, again, going back to Lord of the Rings, like when the 3 of them dudes were together, the dwarf, the elf, and the human, they was fighting like a bunch of orcs. They was taking out mad orcs by themselves. Like 3 of them took out like an orc army. That's a similar type of flow. They're telling you like each of these guys was able to stand against troops and armies on their own. You know, they number it when you read about a Dino, they say 800. But the other guys in their own right as well were just as mighty because why? They were able to take hundreds of men and kill them. All right? Go ahead, read.
And 3 of the 30 chief went down and came to David in the harvest time unto the cave of Adullam, and the troops of the Philistines pitched in the valley of Rephaim. And David was then in a hold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem. And David longed and said, "Oh, that one would give me drink of water of the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate."
Right, so David was held up, okay, because, you know, the Philistine army was pitched there, and he had these 3 mighty men with him. He had Adino, he had Eleazar, and he had Shema with him, right? Because he had 30, and it's telling you, but of these 3, they went down to him in the cave. So, you know, you there, and you just biding your time, okay, you know, maybe we're going to attack at dawn, night, whatever. And he's thinking out loud, you know, he's like, oh, damn, we by the spot here where they got my favorite wings? Damn, I wish I could have some wings. But he said, I wish I could get some of this water from Bethlehem, right? I'm by the way, right? So he was just thinking out loud. Go ahead, read on. Verse 16.
Verse 16. And the 3 mighty men brake through the host of the Philistines, and drew water out of the well of Bethlehem, that was by the gates, and took it, and brought it to David. Nevertheless, he would not drink thereof, but poured it out unto the Lord.
So they broke through the host of the Philistines, remember, by themselves. Any one of them could have done it. Just to go and get David some water, right? And there's a lot going on here. There's a lot that I want you to think about. First of all, their instant obedience to what they thought was an order, right? They wanted to please their leader, right? You would call that today ministering unto a brother that's over you, right? Because I'm going to get into how important it is to minister to the man above you. Because by your ministering unto them, it frees them up for their administrations. So you holding your office the best way you can allows the next man over you to hold his office. It allows the man next to you of your same rank to hold his office. And as a unit, we're all better. Because while individually we're all great, it's never as strong as the whole. It's never as strong as the unit. And this is why it behooves us to have as many men to man up and have that spirit and roll that way. It wasn't just the care and respect that they had for David. It was like, okay, listen, We know what David's works have been. We know what he deals with. We know how he rolls. The brother just was thinking out loud and said, I wish I had some work. Boom, they all went and they said, we're going to battle for you. So we can bring you that which you desire. Right? Go ahead, read on.
And he said, be it far from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Is not this the blood of the men that went in jeopardy of their lives? Therefore, he would not drink it. These things did these three mighty men.
And David had the spirit where, again, it wasn't in order. And he said, my gosh, you know, these men hazarded their lives for me in this. I gotta drink this order. Because he knew the responsibility that comes with leadership was to not be so selfish to send people on to do things that are at his command to that extent. And the respect he had for his men, all right, there was an understanding there. And he was never going to give them an order that was going to be something so frivolous where they would hazard their lives for something so small. So he said, you know what, I refuse to drink this. I'm offering this up to the Most High. So I don't want this effort to go in vain, but this isn't for me. You don't minister unto the men unto you for themselves, right? You're doing it because the mission at hand and the greater good that needs to go on. You're able to see the whole collective picture of what needs to be done and accomplished. And if you have good leaders, you have leaders that are in the right mind, they're not going to take advantage of that. They're going to roll in that spirit of the Most High in Christ and move that way. And guess what? The scripture tells you, as is the leader, so are his people. So those men, that circle he had next to him, the 30, they all were on that same mind and that same spirit. Go ahead, read.
And Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was chief among three. And he lifted up his spear against 300 and slew them, and had the name among three.
Come on.
Was he not most honorable of three? Therefore, he was their captain. Howbeit he attained not unto the first three.
So it's telling you the first three were the baddest. And this guy was no slouch either. They say he killed 300 on his own. And he was great within his own thing. So it's telling you that there's not just, listen, the greatest is obviously Christ the King, right? But within that, there's order, there's levels, there's structure. And nobody's salty about it. Nobody's, feeling away or emotional. They all know that the Most High is dealing with all these brothers in different ways. So he's telling you, he wasn't as great as the first three, this brother, but he was still pretty bad. And this is going to go later when I bring out that the Most High gives different administrations to different brothers. Don't be the square peg trying to fit into the round hole. Find what it is that you're good at, or let your leaders observe what you're good at, and let them cultivate that in you. Right? There's another scripture later we're going to bring out that it says, covet earnestly the best gifts. Don't envy somebody for those gifts, but covet them. And if the Lord grants it to you, he grants it to you. Don't hate a brother because he has a gift or a skill. Right? Esteem him better than you because he got that. And then say, hey man, I want to see if I can learn that from you. And roll that way. We have to change the way that we roll. It's funny, as all this stuff was going on, I was a little pissed during the week. And I won't play it for the sake of time, but y'all need to look it up. Some of you probably see it's funny as hell. Because I was just talking about how wicked Negroes are, man. And it's just, it truly is a product of what our oppressors have done to us. I will say that. But all they did was activate what was already in us. And they cultivated the worst in us and brought that out. So, because the scripture tells you, right, like our wickedness is the worst, right? I mean, we've taught the wicked our ways. And he has a clip from the Boondocks where Uncle Ruckus comes in to do the exorcism of the dude on the bed. And he said, I send, part of my language, he said, I send your nigga soul back to the depths of hell. The bed is rising. But it's funny because it was more hilarious to me now with everything that I'm seeing going on. All right, and y'all know what I'm talking about with all the stuff and the nonsense that's going on. All right, Friday Night Raw was extensive. If you didn't know, now you know all the BS that was going on. And that thing had me dying because like almost everything that you see going on, Uncle Ruckus was over there just trying to like deflate it. And you know what's interesting is that as funny as it was, he gave a job application, he was like, no, right? So as funny as it was, right, the thing that wound up exercising the spirit from him was unity. So that's why I like the Boondocks, because some people see it as very offensive, And to me, it's just raw, unadulterated truth. And they always show you the flip side of it. What it is it makes you, if you got like a big pimple on your face, and women know this a lot, you're very uncomfortable when you look in the mirror, right? And you try to cover it up, pop it if you can. Some of y'all might not even, some of you get the cold sore, I'm not going out, right? It's not good to look at the reality of what's there, right? And a lot of times, things like the boondocks and stuff like that, it's uncomfortable to you because it shows you the reality of what our people are, what maybe some of us are, what we're capable of. And rather than face it head on and say, how do we address it, we just choose to ignore it and say it's offensive and you shouldn't talk about it. And then let's go on our merry ways and try to be like the other nations, rather than address the elephant in the room, so to speak, right? Anyway, let's get back to this. Did we go to verse 23?
No.
All right, go ahead.
Verse 20. And Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done many acts, he slew 2 lion-like men of Moab, and went down also and slew a lion in the midst of a pit in time of snow.
So he killed Jet Li and Bruce Lee. Go ahead. Because it said it was 2 lion-like men of Moab. All right? So I'm trying to think of the 2 of the baddest ever that brothers like. Jet Li and Bruce Lee, he killed them. All right? Go ahead.
And he slew an Egyptian, a goodly man, and the Egyptian had a spear in his hand. But he went down to him with a staff, and plucked the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and slew him with his own spear.
Come on.
These things did Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and had the name among 3 mighty men. He was more honorable than the 30, but he attained not to the first 3. And David set him over his guard.
So look at the different administrations. Remember I said earlier that there's a physicality, there's a spirituality, there's a mental thing to this whole thing about being manned up. He said this brother was more honorable than all of them, even than Adino, that was the chief of the captains and everything. But he said he still wasn't physically as bad as the other ones. There's nothing wrong with that. In some things, some of us are going to abound more and others less, all right? But the thing is, you got to understand that the Most High is the one that gives those things out, not for vanity's sake, but for the betterment of the mission. It's putting all the parts together, right? Like, I don't know that much about cars. I don't know. How many carburetors are there?
It depends.
Okay. All right. Let me do an engine then. There's only one engine, right? Okay. Well, you need 2 engines in the car for, right? If you have an engine and not the carburetor, or you have an engine and not the starter, right? If everybody want to be the engine, right? And it's the same thing like the scripture says. If all was going to be the eye, where's the hearing? If all want to be the hand, where, the mouth, where's the sight, right? Everything has to work together in harmony. And some people will have multiple things to bring to the table. Some will have just one. But you got to understand that if you're given anything, it's because it's for the furtherment of the building of this nation. And we have to get over these schisms and this BS and move forward. All right? Was that verse 23?
Yes, sir.
Let's get Acts 15 and 16. So I want to point something out. Because everybody's confused because you're hearing Esnite and Dodo the Hurrites and all this other stuff. Acts 15 and 16.
The book of Acts, chapter 15 and verse 16. After this I will return, and will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down. And I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up.
Now part of the tabernacle is dealing with the army of David. That falls under that. So that is going to be built again today. And this is what I'm saying, it's not just the physicality, but those men, if they're not here today, the Most High is reserving them to bring them back. Because those spirits are needed again. Part of our salvation and the rebuilding of the tabernacle is those men coming together again. The 12 coming back, all right? We understand that none of this would have happened if Elijah didn't come back first. And he is coming gone. I don't care, there's going to be rumors of who was it, whatever. We don't know. We don't know. You'll hear things out there and say it was Ave Phoenix or whatever. Nobody's going to go on record and tell you that's what it was, because we don't know. We do know that he was the only one that brought out that northern kingdom.
Bring it out.
And he gave like a fuller understanding. So, let the Spirit deal with you with that. But I'm sure some of you heard that rumor. No, Ave Phoenix was Elijah, whatever. Nobody teaches that. It was just some ruminations that some people had. All right? But the point is that these same spirits are coming back to them. Right? Christ even told you this same generation will be here again. Meaning even all those wicked Negroes that were there, right? And that persecuted Christ. That let a criminal go and an innocent man be crucified. People that cry for blood for their own sake. All these things, all these people are going to come back. So understand part of that tabernacle, right, is that. And it includes both kingdoms, because at that time both kingdoms weren't together. We read it said Israel and Judah. Both kingdoms would come back. Get 1 Chronicles 11 and 10. Yeah, go ahead.
So you have to look at the irony of all that, because in the Old Testament, with the exception of before the split, we were all together, right? The nations, right? Both nations, northern and southern. Once the split happened, egos came into play. And the enemy understood that, because they understand that divide and conquer is very, very vital when it comes to succeeding in their war against us. That's why in the New Testament, the majority of the issues is that we forgot that we were one people. This is why Christ said, and the captain brought it up, that same spirits were going to return today. And you're seeing that. Everything that Christ went through and the disciples, you're seeing that unfold right now. And just in these last few weeks, you're seeing it unfold. How people are just flipping. People that you sat next to are just flipping and like, these guys are demons, we're wicked. That's what I'm saying. Everything Captain's going over, man, it's deeper. It's deeper. It goes real deep. You got to look at it from a real spiritual sense. Y'all looking at it as like from a carnal sense. Oh, well, maybe it is true what they're saying. All right, now you got to look at it deeper. If you're really about this, you're going to see it deeper for what it's worth.
1 Chronicles 11 and 10.
The book of 1 Chronicles, chapter 11 and verse 10. These also are the chief of the mighty men whom David had, who strengthened themselves with him in his kingdom, and with all Israel, to make him king according to the word of the Lord concerning Israel.
All right, so again, the point that I want here is that it's Israel. The mighty men were Israelites. When it says that they strengthened themselves with him in Israel, so what you're reading when you hear like the Esnite, the Harite, and all this other stuff is, that's like us, right? Like, you know, hey, you got your name that you're known on. That's like your street name, right? Like, hey, he was known as this, right? He was known as that. And, right, if you go somewhere to another country, you're going to tell them, I'm American. I'm an American citizen, right? I'm this, I'm that. Same thing. Where are you from? I'm from Chicago, right? Same type of thing. It's dealing with the provinces and stuff where they were from. Let me get 1 Kings 9 and 23.
1 Kings 9 verse 23. These were the chief of the officers that were over...
I'm sorry, start at 22. My mistake.
Verse 22. But the children of Israel did Solomon make no bondmen, but they were men of war, and his servants, and his princes, and his captains, and rulers of his chariots, and his horsemen. Come on. These were the chief of the officers that were over Solomon's work, 550, which bear rule over the people that wrought in the work.
So the point is that always those chief men were Israel. Don't get confused by the other names. The other thing that's interesting to note as I read this is that they always kept the circle relatively small. Now I know 500 doesn't seem that small, but in comparison to what Solomon ruled over, remember, that was, as far as Israel is concerned, that was the largest kingdom that we had, was under Solomon, right? That was when it was the most thriving. He always kept it close. David had 30, Christ had 12. Solomon in all his mightiness and administrations only kept it to the 500 some odd that he had here, right? Don't mean that the other people don't serve their role and purpose and everything, but you got to keep that circle a little small sometimes because, right, you got those Judas Iscariots everywhere, okay? The point I was going to make was, even David's son tried to come against him, right? Absalom. So, you know, you got to be careful about the people you put in positions that keep close. I'm sorry. Let me get 1 Kings 19 and 16.
1 Kings chapter 19 verse 16. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, shalt thou anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha, the son of Shaphat, of Abel Meholah, shalt thou anoint to be prophet in thy room.
Come on.
And it shall come to pass that him that escapeth the sword of Azael shall Jehu slay, and him that escapeth from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay.
Right, so you got to understand that the prophets here were also like warriors, right? They said Elisha was a prophet, and it said anybody who was going to go ahead and escape the sword of Hazael, these two, they were going to make sure that they slayed them. So the prophets also had, it wasn't just teaching is the point that I'm getting to, right? They had other things and other responsibilities. They had that down for the cause thing. Now I'm not saying, again, obviously in this time it was war times, different rulership and stuff like that. We need to look at this spiritually as far as the multiple hats that we wear. All right, so hold 1 Kings and let's get Hosea 6 and 4.
The book of Hosea, chapter 6 and verse 4. O Ephraim, what shall I do unto thee? O Judah, what shall I do unto thee?
Judah's there too. Judah got excited. Oh, we're going to talk about Ephraim. it's both that we're getting blasted. All right, go ahead.
For your goodness is as a morning cloud, and as the early dew it goeth away.
So he's saying there's a lot of fake brothers. There's a lot of fake brothers and sisters in this truth. All right? I'm dealing with the men mostly today, but some of this does have some carryover to the sisters. He said, Ephraim and Judah, man, he said, listen, your goodness, your righteousness, it's like a morning cloud. As the early dew, it goeth away. Y'all not constant.
Therefore have I hewed them by the
The
prophets.
same thing, right? We read in Kings that the prophets would slay these guys. He said, these wicked ones, he said, therefore have I hewed them by the prophets. Go ahead.
I have slain them by the words of my mouth.
Now spiritually, he says, I have slain them by the words of my mouth. Go ahead.
And thy judgments are as the light that goeth forth.
And our judgments as the light that goeth forth. So let's go back to 1 Kings. All right, and let's read on. Read 17 again, and then continue on.
1 Kings 19 verse 17. And it shall come to pass that him that escapeth the sword of Azael shall Jehu slay. And him that escapeth from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay.
Go ahead.
Yet I have left me 7,000 in Israel.
So he's saying, listen, even though Ephraim, Judah, your goodness is as a morning cloud, like a lot of y'all are full of crap and you're not going to endure. He goes, yet I have still left me 7,000 in Israel. Go ahead, read.
All the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, and every mouth which hath not kissed.
So he's saying, listen, no matter what you see, no matter what we're going through, no matter how many wicked Negroes you see, no matter how many betrayals or whatever you see, understand that the Most High still has a remnant. He still has a reserve. And here, it was 7,000. For the last days, he has 144,000 on reserve, right? And then the multitude that's going to come behind that. So understand that, all right? And understand that the 144, I'll wait till I get to that. Go ahead, because I might not get to it today and I don't want to jump ahead. But go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. We'll see. I know I have it for later. We'll see if we get to it. Good. Read on.
So he departed thence, and found Elisha the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and he with the 12. And Elijah passed by him, and cast his mantle upon him. And he left the oxen, and ran after Elijah, and said, Let me, I pray thee, kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow thee. And he said unto him, Go back again, for what have I done to thee?
So now start to see the spirit of Elisha, right? We're looking at the different characteristics of our forefathers. And Elijah came and threw his mantle on him, and he basically left all that stuff that he had in the fields and said, hey man, I'm going to follow after Elijah, right? You have to understand the mindset in that. Now, are we saying leave your jobs and all that stuff like that? No, right? Obviously, it's a different time. But you need to know where your priorities are, right? And, you know, a lot of brothers like to talk about in the scriptures, and I'm going to bring it out later, possibly where it talks about this is our profession, this is this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And everybody talks so strong. This is why the scripture says, don't talk no more so exceedingly proud, right? Be careful of the words that you come out. Don't forswear thyself and stuff like that. Because you've yet to be tempted or tried by something that'll test that mentality. You don't know what your limits are, where your worth is. So to speak so bold, this is why you'll hear me and I say, you know, Lord, will I continue to endure? Lord, you might be here for a dispensation. I might be here for a dispensation. It might not be to the death. I don't know. Too many of us are too presumptuous. Hell, these people that are speaking reckless are speaking as if they have obtained salvation already. A lot of people are overlooking all that and they're running. Why? Because of the way we are, everybody's the one from the boondocks that's strapped to the bed, right? Right now. That's what you see. okay? But my class isn't about that, but I will reference that as an example because it's a reality that we're living right now. And it's ugly, it's terrible. I told you, it's been turning my stomach to see. The scripture does tell us that, I will say this, the scripture does tell us that we will be betrayed by those that are with us in those last days. As sober-minded as I think that I am when it comes to these scriptures and these prophecies, I have to say I'm very taken aback because I thought it would be harder for people to spew the type of things that they're spewing. And what I mean by that is I thought it would take substantial evidence for somebody to turn against each other. And it scares me that all it takes is a rumor by unqualified, like nobody's questioning the source of this stuff or whatever, but they want to question the daytime Sabbath, right? If it's nighttime or daytime or whatever. But all I gotta do is like, you know what it is? It's like, I walk into a room, I drop a grenade, and I run out. And not here, y'all deal with it. I just created chaos and pandemonium. And I think that's the one thing that has me bugged out, so to speak, about all of this, is how easy it is for people to stab people in the back off of nothing and to spew hatred off of nothing. And yet we're not to the point where it's forbidden to preach Christ yet. So you can imagine what the disciples were dealing with, how easy it was for people to hand people over to Paul, right?
Shalom, Israel. I'm Elder Nathaniel, Israel United in Christ. YouTube likes to shut our channels down, as some of you have noticed, ever so often. Subscribing to join IUIC will assure you will always stay connected to our YouTube accounts. We want to do our best to make sure this truth gets out. Please click and join our subscriber YouTube channel called Join IUIC to stay linked to all of our videos. So again, please make sure you subscribe to this Join IUIC channel to get your latest updates on all our YouTube channels. Shalom.